Deshaun Williams wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished mopping the last laboratory floor. The Riverside Research Facility had been shut down for nearly a decade, but someone still needed to keep the place from falling apart completely. That someone was him, and he had been doing this job for 7 long years. His life was quiet now. Too quiet, some might say. After coming back from 2 tours in Afghanistan, he thought he wanted noise and chaos. But the divorce changed all that. When Keisha left him, taking their daughter Aisha with her, silence became his best friend. The converted storage unit behind the main building was perfect for a man who wanted to be forgotten by the world. Every night was the same routine. Clock in at 10. Walk through the empty hallways checking each room. Test the security cameras that nobody ever watched. And make sure the emergency power system still worked. The government paid him decent money to be a caretaker for a place that would probably be torn down someday. He did not mind. It beat dealing with people. The only life he really cared about these days grew in the small patch of dirt behind his little home. Tomatoes, green beans, and corn. His grandmother had taught him the garden when he was young, back in Alabama. Working with soil and seeds reminded him of better times, when the world made sense and his hands could create something instead of just cleaning up after others. Deshaun had just finished watering his tomato plants when the sky caught fire. The streak of light was not like anything he had seen before, and he had seen plenty of aircraft during his military days. This thing moved wrong, too fast and too bright. It left a trail of sparks and what looked like pieces of metal falling like rain. The sound it made was not the roar of jet engines, but something deeper, like the earth itself was groaning. When it hit, the ground jumped under his feet, like a small earthquake. His storage unit rattled, and he heard glass breaking somewhere in the main facility. Car alarms started going off in the parking lot half a mile away. Birds that had been sleeping in the trees around the property took flight all at once, filling the night air with panic wings. Deshaun grabbed his flashlight and ran toward the crash site, his heart pounding. Years of military training kicked in automatically. Assess the situation. Look for survivors. Secure the area. He expected to find twisted metal and maybe a small plane or helicopter that had gone down. What he found instead made him question his sanity. His garden was gone. In its place sat something that belonged in a science fiction movie. The object was smooth and curved like a giant egg made of metal, but metal that seemed alive. Blue light pulsed through lines that ran across its surface like veins. The air around it shimmered with heat, and it made a low, humming sound that he could feel in his bones. Deshaun approached slowly, keeping his flashlight pointed at the ground. The thing was easily the size of his entire living space, maybe bigger. Up close, he could see that parts of it were damaged. Sections of the hull were cracked, and some kind of fluid was leaking from the wounds. The fluid glowed with the same blue light as the rest of the ship. Then the humming stopped. A section of the hull simply disappeared, like a door that was never there suddenly opening. Light spilled out from inside, brighter than his flashlight, but softer somehow. And in that light, something moved. She was tall, taller than any person had a right to be, with arms and legs that seemed to stretch forever. Her skin was not quite skin at all, but something that caught the light and threw it back like water. When she stepped out of her ship, she moved with a grace that reminded Deshaun of dancers he had seen on television, but there was something wrong with the way she walked. She was hurt. Her face was almost human, but not quite. The eyes were too large and held too much wisdom, like she had seen things that would break a normal person's mind. Right now, those eyes were filled with pain and something that looked like fear. Blood ran down her side and arm, but it was not red. It looked like someone had mixed starlight with water, silver and bright and beautiful even as it dripped onto his ruined tomato plants. Every rational part of Deshaun's mind screamed at him to run. Call the police. Call the military. Call someone who knew how to handle situations like this. But there was another part of him, the part that had pulled wounded soldiers from burning vehicles and carried them to safety, that would not let him walk away from someone who needed help. She looked at him with those ancient eyes, and he saw recognition there. She knew he was deciding whether to help or run. And somehow, without saying a word, she was asking him to choose kindness over fear. Deshaun Williams, former Army medic turned lonely janitor, made his choice. He stepped forward and offered his arm to support her weight. She was heavier than she looked, but leaned on him gratefully as they walked slowly toward a storage unit. Neither of them knew that this moment would change not just their lives, but the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. Getting Queen Aria inside his small living space was like trying to help a wounded giant through a doggy door. She had to duck down low, and even then her head nearly touched the ceiling. Deshawn cleared off his old military cot and helped her sit down. The springs creaked under her weight, but the bed held. Her wounds looked bad up close. The silver blood had stopped flowing, but the cuts were deep and seemed to glow from the inside. Deshawn had seen plenty of injuries during his time in the Army, but nothing like this. He grabbed his first aid kit from under the sink, hoping that whatever worked on humans might help her too. "Water," she whispered in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. "Please." Deshawn filled a cup from his kitchen tap and handed it to her. She drank it slowly, carefully, like she was testing whether it might poison her. When nothing bad happened, she drank the rest quickly. "Thank you," she said, and her English was clearer now. "I am Aria, Queen Aria of the Star Collective." Deshawn almost laughed. Here he was, a janitor living in a converted closet, giving first aid to an alien queen. If his ex-wife could see him now, she would think he had finally lost his mind completely. "I am Deshawn," he said, opening his first aid kit. "And right now, Your Majesty, you are bleeding all over my floor." Over the next hour, he cleaned her wounds as best he could. The hydrogen peroxide fizzed when it touched her cuts, just like it did on human skin. She winced but did not cry out. Deshawn wrapped bandages around her arms and torso, working carefully around her strange anatomy. "Your people," she said while he worked, "they do not know we exist." "Some do. The government, maybe, but regular folks like me, we just see lights in the skies sometimes and wonder." Deshawn tied off a bandage. "Most people think we're alone out here." "You are not alone," Aria said softly. "The galaxy is full of life, but much of it is in danger." As the days passed, Aria told him her story. Her people had ruled a peaceful empire among the stars for thousands of years. They had great cities on 100 worlds, with technology that could heal any disease and ships that could cross the galaxy in days. They thought they were safe. Then the hunters came. "They are not alive," Aria explained while Deshawn made her breakfast. He only had eggs and toast, but she ate them gratefully. They are machines that think, but they do not think like us. They see all living things as, how you say, problems to solve. The hunters consumed everything. They would arrive at a planet, strip it of all resources, turn the population into more machines, and move on. They had already destroyed dozens of worlds. Aria's fleet had been scattered while trying to evacuate civilians from their latest target. My ship was damaged in the escape. The navigation system failed, and I crashed here by accident. She looked out a small window toward her ship. "I did not choose your world, but perhaps it chose me." Deshawn found himself looking forward to their conversations. Aria was fascinated by everything about human life. She watched him fix a broken coffee maker with spare parts from an old radio and asked 100 questions. How did he know which parts would work? Where did he learn to combine different technologies? "My grandmother always said, 'Use what you got to get what you need,'" Deshawn explained, testing his repaired coffee maker. "We do not have fancy tools, so we learn to be creative." Aria nodded thoughtfully. "Your people have something my civilization lost long ago. We became so advanced that we forgot how to adapt. When our technology fails, we are helpless." She was amazed by his garden, too. Even though her ship had destroyed most of it, Deshawn had salvaged some plants and replanted them in containers. He showed her how to check soil moisture with his finger and how to tell when tomatoes were ready to pick. "On my home world, we have machines that grow our food," Aria said, carefully holding a small tomato plant. "Perfect nutrition, perfect timing. But this comes from your hands and your knowledge." In return, Aria taught Deshawn about her technology. Her people used something called biometal that could repair itself and change shape based on need. She showed him how to seal small cracks in her ship's hull using a paste made from her blood mixed with common dirt. "Your materials are primitive," she said, but they work in ways ours do not. They are stubborn. They do not give up easily. Together, they began making real progress on her ship repairs. Deshawn would scavenge parts from the research facility during the day, while Arya rested and healed. At night, they would work together, combining human ingenuity with alien science. Arya's wounds were healing faster than should have been possible. Deshawn's simple first aid had somehow kick-started her natural healing process. She said it was because humans approached medicine differently than her people. You see injury and think about fixing what is broken, she explained. My people see injury and think about replacing what is damaged. Your way is better for living beings. Deshawn found himself changing too. For the first time since his divorce, he had someone to talk to. Someone who listened when he told stories about his grandmother's garden or his time in the army. Arya did not judge him for living alone or for choosing simple work over complicated careers. As her ship slowly came back to life, both of them began to dread the moment when she would have to leave. Neither spoke about it, but they both felt time running out like sand through their fingers. What they did not know was that time had already run out. High above Earth's atmosphere, something was scanning the planet with mechanical precision, following the same energy signature that had led it across 3 star systems. The hunters had found them. Deshawn was replacing a damaged power coupling on Arya's ship when the sky went dark. It was not clouds blocking the sun. It was something much worse. The thing that blotted out the afternoon light was massive, easily a kilometer long and half as wide. It looked like someone had taken a city and stretched it into the shape of a dagger. Its surface was covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, like optical illusions made of black metal and pulsing red lights. "No," Arya whispered, her voice filled with terror. "They found me." The hunter's ship hung motionless above them for several long seconds, like a predator deciding how to kill its prey. Then it began to move, and Deshawn understood why Arya was so afraid. The massive vessel did not make any sound as it descended. No roar of engines, no whistling of wind. It moved with the silence of death itself, settling into a position about 2 miles above the research facility. From its belly, dozens of smaller objects began to drop like seeds from a dying tree. Deshawn grabbed the binoculars and focused on the falling objects. What he saw made his blood run cold. They were not ships in any sense that humans would understand. They looked like mechanical spiders the size of cars, each one supported by 8 jointed legs that ended in points sharp enough to pierce concrete. Their bodies gleamed with the same disturbing geometry as their mother ship. "How many?" Arya asked, working frantically at a control panel inside her ship. "Too many," Deshawn said, watching the spider-like machine spread out in perfect formation. "They are landing all around us. Maybe 50 or 60 of them." Each hunter machine touched down with mechanical precision, their legs digging into the ground like anchors. Red scanning beams swept out from their central bodies, methodically examining every building, every tree, every piece of metal on the property. "They are looking for my quantum signature," Arya explained, her hands flying over alien controls. "My ship gives off energy that they can track. I am trying to activate the stealth systems, but they were damaged in the crash." Deshawn watched the nearest hunter machine approach the main laboratory building. Its scanning beam passed over the structure once, twice, then focused on a particular section. The machine moved forward with mechanical determination, its legs punching holes in the parking lot pavement. "How long do you need?" Deshawn asked. 10 minutes, maybe 15. "We do not have 15 minutes. Deshawn was already moving, grabbing his tool belt and heading for the door. "Stay here and keep working. I am going to buy us some time." "Deshawn, no. These machines kill everything that moves. You cannot fight them with your simple weapons." He turned back to look at her, and Arya saw something in his eyes that reminded her why humans had survived ice ages and world wars and every other disaster their planet had thrown at them. "Lady, I spent 2 tours in Afghanistan dodging people who wanted to kill me. I know this facility better than anyone alive, and I got 7 years' worth of spare parts and broken equipment lying around." He grabbed a heavy wrench from his tool belt. Time to see what this old janitor can do. Deshawn ran toward the main building, his mind already working on a plan. The hunters were systematic, predictable. They would check every building in order, starting with the largest and working their way down. That gave him maybe 20 minutes before they reached Aria's ship. The research facility had been studying advanced physics before it was abandoned. Most of the dangerous equipment had been removed, but plenty of interesting toys remained. Deshawn had spent years learning how every system in the building worked, from the backup generators to the experimental power grid. His first stop was the security office. The motion sensors throughout the building were still active, connected to a central computer that had been gathering dust for a decade. Deshawn quickly reprogrammed the system, turning motion detectors into proximity alarms and connecting them to the building's old fire suppression system. When the first hunter machine broke down the main door, it was immediately soaked with pressurized water mixed with fire retardant foam. The machine did not seem bothered by getting wet, but its red scanning beam flickered and sparked. Deshawn smiled. Water and electronics did not play well together, even alien electronics. His second trap was more sophisticated. The facility's main laboratory still contained an old electromagnetic field generator, designed for experiments that required strong magnetic fields. Deshawn rewired it to the building's power grid and set it to activate when the hunters entered the lab. The electromagnetic pulse was not strong enough to destroy the machines, but it scrambled their coordination systems. Instead of moving in perfect formation, they began bumping into walls and each other, their scanning beams sweeping wildly. Deshawn moved through the building like a ghost, using maintenance tunnels and service corridors that only he knew existed. He rigged more traps, using whatever he could find. Industrial welding equipment modified to create blinding flashes of light, chemical storage tanks connected to the ventilation system to fill rooms with harmless but confusing smoke. Each trap only delayed the hunters for a few minutes, but those minutes added up. The machines were learning, adapting to his tricks, but they still had to check every room systematically. That systematic approach was their weakness. By the time the hunters had worked their way through most of the building, Deshawn had led them into the main laboratory. This was where he would make his last stand. Aria needed just a few more minutes to complete her repairs. The laboratory contained one piece of equipment that even Deshawn had been afraid to touch, an experimental quantum resonance chamber. The original researchers had built it to study the fundamental structure of reality itself, but they had abandoned the project when the device proved too unstable to control. Warning signs covered the machine in 3 languages. Extreme danger. Do not operate without authorization. Potential reality distortion. Deshawn looked at the warnings and shrugged. Reality was already pretty distorted when alien death machines were hunting his friend in his backyard. The hunters surrounded him in the laboratory, their red scanning beams all focused on his position. They had found what they were looking for, the human who had been helping their target. Now they would eliminate him and continue their search. Deshawn's hand hovered over the quantum chamber's activation switch. He had no idea what would happen when he pressed it. The machine might explode, taking him and half the building with it. It might tear a hole in space and time, or it might do absolutely nothing. "Come on, then," he said to the mechanical killers surrounding him. "Let us see what happens when human stubbornness meets alien technology." He pressed the switch. The quantum chamber erupted with energy that was every color and no color at once. Reality seemed to bend and twist around the laboratory, and for a moment Deshawn felt like he was falling through the universe itself. The hunter machines froze mid-step, their red beams flickering and going dark. When the energy pulse faded, half the hunters were offline, and the rest were moving in slow, confused circles. Their perfect coordination had been shattered by an energy pattern they could not process. Deshawn ran toward Aria's ship, hoping she had used the time well. Behind him, the hunters were already beginning to recover from the quantum pulse, but they had lost precious minutes. It would have to be enough. Deshawn reached Aria's ship just as her engines came back online. The blue glow that ran to the hull was brighter now, pulsing with renewed energy. Behind him, he could hear the mechanical sounds of the hunter machines recovering from the quantum pulse, their systems slowly coming back to life. "The stealth field is working," Aria called out as he climbed aboard. "But it will not hide us for long. We must leave immediately." Deshawn strapped himself into what he assumed was a passenger seat, though it was clearly designed for someone much taller than him. The ship lifted off smoothly, rising through the atmosphere without any of the violent shaking he expected, through a viewing screen. He watched Earth shrink below them until it became just another blue dot among the stars. For the first few minutes, neither of them spoke. Deshawn was trying to process what had just happened to his quiet life, while Arya focused on piloting her ship away from the hunter vessel that was still searching the area below. "They will not find us now," Arya finally said, relaxing slightly as they put distance between themselves and Earth. "But they know I was there. They will return with more ships and scan every inch of your planet until they find traces of my presence." "So we led them straight to my home," Deshawn said bitterly. "Great job, team." "No." Arya turned to face him, her large eyes serious. "You saved my life. In doing so, you may have saved countless others. What you did back there, my own royal guards could not have accomplished what you did with nothing but broken equipment and determination." Deshawn looked out at the stars rushing past them. "I just used what I had available. Anyone could have done the same thing. That is exactly my point." Arya activated several controls, and the viewing screen changed to show a map of the galaxy. Hundreds of star systems were marked in red. These are the world the hunters have already consumed. Each one had advanced civilizations, powerful militaries, sophisticated technology. None of it mattered. The scale of destruction was overwhelming. Entire sectors of space had gone dark. Their populations converted into more hunter machines or simply eliminated. Deshawn counted at least 50 star systems that had fallen, representing billions of lives lost. "My people have been fighting this war for 3 years," Arya continued. "We have the most advanced ships in the galaxy, weapons that can destroy planets, defensive systems that our enemies should not be able to penetrate. And yet we keep losing." She highlighted another section of the map, showing the current positions of her scattered fleet. The Star Collective's remaining ships were spread thin across dozens of systems, trying to evacuate civilians while fighting a losing retreat. "The hunters learn from every battle," Arya explained. "Each time we use a tactic against them, they adapt. Each time we deploy a new weapon, they find a counter. They are perfect soldiers, perfect strategists. They make no mistakes." Deshawn studied the tactical display, his military training helping him understand the situation. "You are fighting them like they are a normal enemy. But they are not normal, are they? No. They think like machines because they are machines. They calculate the most efficient path to victory and follow it exactly. Their tactics are mathematically perfect. And that is their weakness," Deshawn said suddenly. "Perfect soldiers do not know how to deal with imperfect tactics." Arya looked at him with growing interest. "Explain." Deshawn pointed at the red zones on the map. "Every species they have defeated probably fought them the same way. Big ships against big ships, advanced weapons against advanced weapons, logical tactics against logical tactics. But what if someone fought them with tactics that made no sense? What if someone was unpredictable on purpose?" "You mean like activating an experimental weapon without knowing what it would do?" "Exactly." Deshawn was getting excited now, ideas flowing faster than he could speak them. "Humans are not the smartest species in the galaxy. We do not have the best technology. But we have something these machines cannot understand." "What is that?" "We are crazy enough to try stupid things that should not work. And sometimes they do work." Deshawn gestured at the tactical display. "Your people see a problem and calculate the best solution. The hunters do the same thing, just faster and better. But humans? We see a problem and we try 20 different solutions at once, including some that are completely insane." Arya was quiet for a long moment, processing this idea. Her species had evolved beyond the need for desperate improvisation. They had technology that could solve almost any problem through careful analysis and precise application of scientific principles. The concept of deliberately choosing chaos over order was foreign to them. "You are suggesting that humanity's greatest weakness might be their greatest strength against an enemy like this?" "I am saying that maybe you need allies who are too stupid to know when they are beaten." Deshawn looked out at the stars again, thinking about his species scattered across one small planet. "Humans have been fighting impossible odds since we first picked up sticks and decided to hunt animals 10 times our size. We do not always win, but we never stop trying new approaches. Arya activated her ship's communication systems, sending out encrypted signals to the scattered remnants of her fleet. I am calling for an emergency council meeting. The fleet commanders need to hear this proposal. What proposal? That we recruit humanity as allies in this war. Arya's expression was determined now, filled with the kind of hope she had not felt since the war began. Not as subjects or protectorates, but as equal partners. Your people would bring something to this conflict that we have been missing. Deshawn felt a chill run down his spine. You are talking about dragging my entire species into a galactic war. Most humans do not even know aliens exist. The hunters will find Earth eventually, Arya said gently. When they do, your people will face the same choice every other species has faced. Fight or die. But if we act now, we can give humanity a chance to fight on terms that favor your unique abilities. She showed him more tactical displays, explaining her fleet's current disposition and the strategic situation across multiple star systems. The Star Collective was not losing because they lacked courage or determination. They were losing because they were fighting an enemy that could outthink them at every turn. My species excels at building perfect solutions to known problems, Arya explained. But the hunters have become a problem we cannot solve with perfection. Perhaps they can only be solved with organized chaos. Deshawn thought about his neighbors back on Earth. Ordinary people living ordinary lives with no idea that mechanical death was stalking them across the galaxy. Plumbers and teachers and shop clerks who had never fired a weapon in their lives, but who faced down hurricanes and earthquakes and personal tragedies with the same stubborn determination he had shown in the laboratory. If we do this, he said slowly, it cannot be about making humans into better soldiers. It has to be about making humans into something the hunters have never faced before. What would that be? Deshawn smiled, thinking about his grandmother's advice and his own improvised repairs, and every time in human history, when someone had looked at an impossible situation and decided to try something completely ridiculous, an entire species that refuses to follow the rules. 6 months after Deshawn first stepped aboard an alien starship, the galaxy learned to fear a new kind of warrior. They did not look like soldiers. They looked like the people you passed on the street every day without giving them a second thought. Tanya Johnson had been fixing air conditioning units in Detroit when the recruiters found her. She knew more about moving air through tight spaces than most engineers knew about aerodynamics. Now she stood on the bridge of a Star Collective battleship, wearing coveralls that had been modified with alien technology, explaining to a room full of confused alien commanders why their perfectly designed ventilation systems were useless against hunter infiltration units. See, you built these ducts to move air efficiently, Tanya said, pointing at the ship's blueprints. But efficient means predictable. The hunters can map your entire ship just by analyzing airflow patterns. She pulled out a piece of duct tape and some wire from her tool belt. But if we add some random restrictions here and here, create some dead ends that go nowhere, make the system work worse on purpose, then they cannot figure out your ship's layout. The alien engineers looked horrified at the idea of deliberately making their systems less efficient. The humans in the room just nodded and started taking notes. 3 star systems away, Jerome Washington was teaching a mixed squad of humans and aliens how to repair hunter damage using nothing but spare parts and determination. Jerome had spent 15 years as a maintenance supervisor at a steel mill before the war. He knew how to keep ancient machinery running when replacement parts did not exist and the budget was non-existent. This hunter beam weapon melted through your hull plating, Jerome explained, examining the damage to their captured ship. Your people want to replace the entire section with new materials. That will take 3 days and cost a fortune. He pulled out his welding torch and some scrap metal. But if we patch it with whatever we have lying around, reinforce it with support beams that do not match, and seal the gaps with foam insulation, it will be stronger than the original, and we can do it in 2 hours. The alien crew members watched in amazement as Jerome and his human team turned their perfectly designed vessel into something that looked like it had been built in a junkyard. When they tested it against hunter weapons, the ugly patchwork repairs absorbed twice as much damage as the original hull plating. Back on Earth, Recruitment centers had opened in every major city, but they were not looking for soldiers or pilots or engineers. They were looking for people who knew how to make broken things work, who could solve problems with limited resources, who had spent their lives being overlooked by a world that valued fancy degrees over practical knowledge. Bus mechanics, short-order cooks, apartment building superintendents, daycare workers, taxi drivers. People who dealt with chaos every day and somehow kept the world running despite impossible circumstances. These were the humans the Star Collective needed. Deshawn had been promoted to something called Chief Strategic Coordinator, which sounded impressive, but basically meant he spent his time figuring out new ways to confuse Hunter battle computers. His current project involved a team of former food truck operators who had somehow figured out how to make Hunter ships crash into each other by broadcasting conflicting navigation signals. The key is that Hunter fleets move in perfect formation, explained Rosa Martinez, who had been cooking tacos in Los Angeles before joining the war effort. They calculate the most efficient path for every ship and follow it exactly. But if you mess with their calculations just a little bit, she demonstrated by activating a device that looked like it had been built from kitchen timers and old radio parts. On the tactical display, an entire Hunter squadron suddenly veered off course, their perfect formation dissolving into chaos as ships tried to avoid collisions that their confused computers said were inevitable. The breakthrough moment came during the Battle of Kepler Station. A massive Hunter fleet had surrounded the Star Collective's main supply depot, preparing to crush it with overwhelming firepower. The alien commanders calculated that they had maybe 3 hours before their defenses collapsed completely. That was when Deshawn unveiled his secret weapon. A strike team led by Marcus Thompson, a former plumber from Chicago who had never fired a gun in his life, but knew more about finding weak points in complex systems than any military strategist. Marcus and his team did not attack the Hunter fleet directly. Instead, they infiltrated the massive Hunter command ship, using maintenance tunnels that the machines had dismissed as too small to be tactically relevant. Once inside, they did not try to destroy the ship's weapons or engines. They went after the plumbing. Every ship, even an alien death machine, needed systems to move fluids and gases from one place to another. Coolant for weapons, hydraulics for moving parts, waste disposal for organic prisoners. Marcus and his team systematically reversed the flow in every pipe they could find, creating pressure buildups in systems that were never designed to handle them. The result was spectacular. The Hunter command ship did not explode dramatically. It simply stopped working, its perfect systems grinding to a halt as toilets backed up into weapon cooling systems and hydraulic fluid mixed with drinking water. The ship's computer spent so much processing power trying to figure out what was wrong that it could not coordinate the fleet's attack. The other Hunter ships, suddenly cut off from Central Command, reverted to individual action protocols. But individual protocols were no match for organized chaos. Human teams hit them with attacks that made no tactical sense. Garbage trucks modified with alien shields ramming into cruisers. Construction equipment welding random metal plates onto Hunter hulls to block their sensors. Even a marching band that had somehow weaponized sound waves. The Hunters tried to adapt, but how do you adapt to tactics that change every few minutes based on whatever materials happen to be available? How do you counter strategies that are deliberately inefficient and chaotic? As the last Hunter ship retreated from Kepler Station, broadcasting confused error messages, Deshawn stood on the command deck watching his people celebrate. Janitors and mechanics and line cooks had just defeated the most advanced military force the galaxy had ever seen. Queen Aria approached him, her expression filled with something that might have been pride or amazement or both. "Your species never ceases to surprise me," she said. 3 years of defeats, and then humans arrive and turn this war into, I am not sure what to call it. Deshawn looked out at the stars, thinking about all the ordinary people who had stepped up to fight an extraordinary enemy. People who had never wanted to be heroes, but who had become something even more valuable. They had become themselves, just with alien technology and a bigger stage. "We called it Tuesday," Deshawn said with a smile. "Just another day of fixing things that were not supposed to be broken and making things work that were not supposed to work." Across the galaxy, the tide of war was turning, not because humanity had brought superior firepower or advanced technology to the fight. They had brought something much more dangerous to an enemy that valued perfection above all else. They had brought the beautiful, stubborn, chaotic refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible to fix.